You're about to enter an alternate reality where people don't hate each other or religion. A reality where people actually talk to each other about their differences. Don't believe me? Buckle up, because you're about to hear the new sound of the counterculture. You are now entering the Resistance Podcast.
Carter here, the Resistance Podcast. You are listening to the new sound of the counterculture. Typically, when I have Tim Preuss on the show, we do a segment called The Way I See It, but we thought we'd switch it up this time around, and we are actually going to be having some friends of ours on, Halsey English and Steph McWilliams. And tonight is going to be a debate of sorts, and the way this came about was that it was a lot of times Tim and Halsey will kind of banter off the scenes, and we just found it so entertaining that we wanted to share it with all of you guys and make it live and public. So tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about foreign policy, one of the key areas they disagree on, and hopefully you'll find it as entertaining as we do. But first off, I want to let each of the people introduce themselves. So we can start with Halsey, go to Steph, and go to Tim. So Halsey.
Good evening, everybody. I am the editor-in-chief and co-owner of HalseyNews.com, reinventing investigative journalism. We're a website focused on commentary on multiple different angles, multiple different sources. We have YouTube channels. We have a great writing duo. And please give us a visit, HalseyNews.com.
All right, okay. Steph.
I am Stephanie McWilliams. I am also a co-owner of HalseyNews.com and the Halsey News Network. I am also the editor-at-large at Halsey News. I write commentary, and I am just starting a YouTube show called Right Millennial, and I'm very excited to get started with that. So please check it out, and follow me on Twitter, and that'd be awesome.
And Tim.
Well, it's not the first time that I've appeared on your channel, so I'm excited to be here again. Name's Tim Preuss. I have a podcast. The name of the podcast is the Tim Preuss Podcast. I don't know, it's a pretty original sounding thing, but everyone come check it out. We have a lot of laughs, and although the debate tonight will probably be fiery and pretty much centered on foreign policy, on the podcast itself, we get into all sorts of fun stuff. So come check us out.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really what this is about. It's about exploring ideas, and even if we're debating and it gets heated or whatever, at the end of the day, it's about finding the best ideas, and that's something that we all agree on. That we're all on the same ground with. So, going into this, I want to start off with a series of articles that you guys wrote. You wrote rebuttals to each other online, and I thought it was really interesting, and I wanted to put it to audio and video, but the topic of the subject was economics and war, and I believe what spurred it was Tim wrote an article called What We Shouldn't Want, World War III.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? And then Halsey wrote a rebuttal, and then Tim wrote another rebuttal. And then did you do a follow-up to that, or was that kind of...
I believe I did. I'm not positive if we published it or not, because then we took it offline and just started kind of going at it, so we didn't have to wait for the next rebuttal.
Okay. All right.
Privately. So that's why we had to bring you guys out here, so everybody can enjoy this.
Let's air our dirty laundry. Okay. Tim, tell me about the premise of the initial article.
The premise of the article was that we have a lot of Americans who are very eager for a World War III, and they think that America is just so strong and so powerful and so mighty that it can take on any enemy and defeat them. And the point of the article was that we actually have a lot of very economic problems, and that we're not actually in a good position to wage war, especially not a World War III. And some people were talking about a war with Russia or a war with China. You know, we can deal with petty little terrorist groups in the Middle East. That's fine. That's nothing. But if we want to actually go to war with a real country, my point was that no. We're not in the position to go to war. And the strength isn't there. The economic strength isn't there. The numbers aren't there. As since the end of World War II, we've basically felt that we are the best in the world. But also since World War II, our share of the global GDP has shrank. And it's something that we don't really keep in mind. Before World War II, Britain was the great country in the world. And after that, America kind of took over. And I think we're in a position right now where Asia is going to be taking over. And we shouldn't take that lightly, and we should take it into account when we're dealing with foreign policy.
And Halsey, where'd you come in on that argument?
So I actually think just the opposite. I think that the only wars that America is prepared to fight are massive global interventions. I don't think that the wars that we fought since World War II have been real kind of throwdowns where we're looking to actually win a decisive victory. And when I made the economic argument that America is not only positioned to do so, but overwhelmingly positioned to do so, it was on the basis that since World War II and since the Geneva Conventions and the introduction of so-called international law, we have not fought actual wars. We have not fought any actual wars. Even the conflict in Vietnam was not an actual war. The political will hasn't been there to actually win one. So I'm of the opinion that America, with its military spending and its ability to intervene overseas, is only prepared to fight a war it can win, not a police intervention where it requires sustained capital and sustained manpower just to maintain a status quo.
What do you think of that, Tim?
I don't think we're prepared for that. I mean, I think a lot of the skirmishes we get into, whether it's Al Qaeda or ISIS or whatever, are it's just a waste of money for the most part, because that part of the world is a waste of time for us by and large. But I don't think that economically we can go to war with China. I think that we have a lot of chutzpah. We really like to say that we're the top dog, but at the end of the day, we're not. Our banks are empty. We're loaded with debt, $20 trillion in debt, and we think that we're going to be able to fight a war. By the way, about $1.5 trillion of that debt is owned by China. If China were to just come in and say, hey, we want our money back, we would have no choice but to completely devalue our currency by printing it rapidly. And how do you pay for missiles when your dollars are worth nothing? You don't pay for missiles. That's how it goes. So we're in a much more fragile position than many would lead us to believe.
I mean, that's a little oversimplification, because the missiles actually are already paid for. We already have a stockpile of weapons. I mean, we spend more on our military per year than I believe the next 12 countries combined. And our ability to project military force is unparalleled. And I said I wasn't going to go down the World War II rabbit hole, so I'm not. I'm just prefacing this by saying this. What I'm talking about is strategy. And the strategy in World War II was to break the back of the enemy. There were lots of little tertiary arguments that were made to the commanders during that time. We should bomb the rail cars that were going to Auschwitz. We should attack the satellite states in hope of winning small victories here and there. And the overwhelming opinion was that we had to break the back of the enemy. There would be nothing short of overall victory that would ease the suffering of anybody involved in the war. And what I advocate is that if we were prepared to do that now, we're firmly in position to do it. And the argument that, China owns this much debt and we would have to do that, that's assuming that we're playing by the rules at that point. Right now, we would play by the rules because we're at a time of peace. At a time of absolute war, there would be no playing by the rules. It wouldn't be like China could just go to the open marketplace and say, here's America's debt. And we could say, that sucks. We are still the reserve currency of the world. And there's no real evidence that other countries, even enemies, would stop using that currency in order to trade goods and services, because the only stability on the planet is the American currency, even though it's a complete mess.
Yeah, but Halsey, I got a question. Does Tim have a point where, we may have all this stuff already purchased, but when you go to war with a major power, you're not necessarily going to have money to continue and maintain the war machine if you're broke. Like,
it depends. It depends on what's called from a military standpoint. It's called a sustainability principle. Is that a country like Japan, when they entered World War II, it cost money to fight that war, and a lot of money to fight that war, because they had to import all of their goods and services that they were going to use to power their war machine. America is self-sustaining. So yes, what he said is 100% true, that we would have to print money at a rapid pace. But the thing is that you can only value that money against what someone else is willing to take for it. So a country like Zimbabwe, when they devalue their currency, then all of a sudden you're paying $1 trillion Zimbabwean dollars for something. But in America, if you determine that something is worth this, and this is how much the currency is worth, and you have the raw materials to barter and sell for it, then the devaluation of a currency is meaningless.
Tim, what do you think of that?
No, I would disagree. I think the value of a currency is not controlled by a government. He had talked earlier, just a few minutes ago, about how countries in the world aren't about to stop trading with the U.S. dollar, that the American dollar is still the world reserve currency. Hello, they already did that. They already are stopping. Like there are 40-some countries that are no longer trading with the U.S. dollar. China and Russia actually made out a deal recently where they're going to be trading exclusively with gold. They're no longer going to be using the dollar. That means that the dollar loses demand, which means it loses value. This is important stuff, and these are macroeconomic issues. And I think that we, at the end of the day, have to take those into account when we go to war with an actual superpower. We're not talking about fighting a war against some towel head with an AK-47. We're talking about a legitimate superpower, a world army. And America is not in the place to do that. And I think that we still we have this kind of euphoria that we've had since World War II. But since World War II, America's strength has declined. America's influence has declined. And a lot of people are living in the past.
I would agree with both of those things, but there was something else. I remember it got us down the rabbit hole in the first place, which made the rebuttals start happening on the articles. The original argument that I had with you was that an economic argument against war is not a legitimate argument, because the only argument for war is a threat to national security. I don't believe that a tertiary argument is an argument for war. I believe only casus belli is a cause for war. So what I had said in my original rebuttal was that if you're saying this country attacked us, but we don't have the money to fight back, I don't believe that's a legitimate argument, because you're telling your citizens that the only responsibility the American government has is to some kind of principle that's not even relevant. That if a government needs to go to war because it's attacked, that then an economic argument is not worth making. That was my original rebuttal to his argument. Secondly, I'll let it go there.
My question is not so much whether, and I get what you're saying about the principle that if the United States is under attack, it is presumed that you will do what it takes to get there. My question is it possible to do? And I know you were speaking about China, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding this, but if we were supposedly at war with China, would not that have a huge impact even just on our goods and our manufacturing? I just feel like that would be so far reaching beyond just the currency issue, but where would we be getting all of our stuff? I just wonder what you think about that, Halsey, I guess.
Me?
Yes.
I mean, this was also one of our main sticking points of disagreement, that in World War II, the reason that we came out of the Depression and we were able to expand into the baby boomer generation is that we were able to gear up American manufacturing to handle the war machine. Mm-hmm. And after the war machine was over, we had all of these factories that were left and all of these goods that were made to produce different types of weapons. Now, I know where Tim's going to go, because I completely agree with him on it, is that's what gave birth to the military industrial complex. And that is overwhelmingly been a bad thing. So I'm not disagreeing with that, but on a strictly economic argument, that gearing up for war with a major superpower in terms of manufacturing, that we have the capacity to accommodate that within our own economy internally.
Is that a valid argument, Tim, as far as, the self-sustaining nature of the United States? If we were to go to war and, from the economic point of view, would we be able to, kind of drive ourselves through that?
Not really. I mean, you can look at history, and war doesn't actually bring wealth. A lot of people have a wrong view of what World War II did. They think that because America was involved in war, that we had all these factories that are building bombs and they're building tanks and everyone's employed, and the people that aren't employed are in Germany or in Japan, and it led to an economic boom. In fact, it didn't. Those were resources that could have been used for creating consumer goods. Instead, what they were used for was destroying consumer goods. So Ludwig von Mises put this very, very perfectly when he said that the same kind of prosperity that war brings is like the kind of prosperity that a tornado brings. Yes, if a tornado goes through a neighborhood, then you're going to have jobs because everyone's going to be employed rebuilding the neighborhood. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily good. War does not bring prosperity. And this is another thing where I think we have to think about it as a holistic approach. Is war good for an economy or bad for an economy? I say that war is overall a negative for an economy, both the enemy's economy and ours. And it's something that we need to take into account when we're talking about foreign policy. War is bad for an economy. And that means that people's standards of living are going to go down. That means that everything is going to cost more. It means that people aren't going to be employed doing things that actually benefit other people. They're just going to be employed making bombs and making tanks and making guns. Who does this benefit? Who does this benefit? It doesn't benefit anybody. All it benefits is the few people, the relative handful of people who are in the arms manufacturing trade. And the military industrial complex certainly benefits from that. But as an overall economy, does our GDP grow or shrink when we're at war? Real dollars. I'm not talking about nominal value. I'm talking about real value, and that's a difference. Yeah, we might see, we have more money at our hands. What is it worth, though? How many dollars have we had to print in order to go to war? This is a waste of money. And I agree 100% with Halsey that the only time that America should go to war is if we are actually threatened. I don't know that there's been a single time that we've been threatened since World War II. Vietnam was not a threat. Korea was not a threat. Iraq is not a threat. And right now, Syria is not a threat. They're a threat to their own people. They're a threat maybe to their neighbors. They're not a threat to us, though. So why are we spending our dollars? Keep in mind, we still have a national debt of $20 trillion. And this is the argument I love to bring to people, and the analogy I love to bring to people, is that if I had a credit card in my child's name, would it make sense for me to put my neighbor's, not mine, but my neighbor's security system on my child's credit card? So I don't have to pay it off. My neighbor doesn't have to pay it off. My kid has to pay it off. You think that's moral? I think it's radically immoral for us to burden and saddle our children with the debt of paying for other countries' national defense.
Okay, Tim. So
wait a minute. There was 2 points that he made that overlooked what I said. What I said was not that the economy of war is what drives an economy. In a free market economy, the gearing up and the fighting of a war led to an overabundance of factories, manufacturing lines, and resource attainment that after the war was over was able to be turned over to private industry at rock bottom prices. And they were already employing the people that needed to go drive the economic boom that followed World War II. I'm not talking about the actual manufacturing of bombs and guns. I'm talking about the after effect on the economy of a war machine that was spun up. Yes, it absolutely has negative consequences. There's no doubt about it. But having factories that are ready to produce the very things that are going to power an economy. In World War II, it was cars that were done out of tanks and trucks, and the precision things that were the manufacturing base that was creating all kinds of consumer goods. These days, it would be the same thing, but it would be for technology. If we were creating missiles, if we were creating bombs, if we were creating drones, these are the kind of things that we would now have manufacturing lines internally spun up to turn over to the private industry people after the war was over, if we engaged in that level of conflict. That was one of the things that was overlooked in what I said.
Okay, and what was the second point you trying to make? Maybe make that point, and then I want to kind of move on as well to what which wars might be justified in either of your views in the present day. But first, yeah.
The second thing that we were talking about was using a credit card and passing that debt on to your children. Okay. There's a flip side to that. If I'm starting a business nowadays and I take a loan from the bank and a credit card and all of those things to build my business, and I take that debt and I use it to expand my business and to make my business into a real powerhouse, even if there is a level of debt to it, when I pass that on to my children, it's most likely going to be a net good thing, especially if it has value. I'm not saying that our $20 trillion in debt is a good thing. I'm saying it's an oversimplification to use the premise of we're putting it on the credit card and handing the debt to our children.
Tim, do you have a quick rebuttal to the net good argument, or should we get on to Steph's question about what conflicts would be relevant nowadays?
Yeah, no, we can talk about the World War II factories. I mean, that argument assumes that these factories would not have been built were it not for World War II. World War II caused the American government to build a shit ton of factories. And then after the war was over, they were able to retool these armories and make consumer goods. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that those factories wouldn't have existed otherwise.
It means that it would have been a huge boost, though, because the most expensive part of starting a business is the startup phase. It's the buying of the factory. It's the making of the manufacturing lines. It's the hiring of employees. It's the getting people onto schedules. It's getting the raw materials and the contracts that are going to bring those things in. Those are the things where a business overwhelmingly fails. So
yes,
if you're handing that over to private industry with that already developed, then you're already a step ahead of if it was just started on its own. Not saying that it's
no, I don't think you're a step ahead though.
Okay, another 30 seconds for you on that, and then maybe I'd like to move on to, as I said, what you guys are thinking about contemporary conflicts, and if there are any conflicts at this point that you feel are relevant to American security,
or what would justify a conflict in the modern.
Yeah.
Before we get to that,
30 seconds.
No, we're assuming that the government just did this, for free? No, what they did is they printed money. They devalued the American currency in order to make those factories. So it's not like the American government just built those factories and then after the war, they were just magically there. They taxed everyone. They devalued everyone's currency through inflation. It was a very, very bad thing. We had a huge period of inflation. If you look at the dollar at 1913 compared to until now, it's lost 96% of its value. So these factories that were just magically built, and if you benefited from a factory, good for you. What if you weren't working at a factory? It's great for the people that work at the factories. It's great for the factory,
and I don't know why you used a date that preceded the Great Depression. You're not using a date of currency after what I talked about, which was after World War II. You used a date that was way pre-Great Depression, which of course the currency was heavily devalued after that. I'm saying that the dates that I'm speaking of are the baby boomer generation, which came at the end of World War II,
which has greatly been devalued.
Okay. We see we're moving on for this.
And it seems to be, we went down the World War II rabbit hole, which is great because history is a good learning tool from the past, but it's also not a set and dried template for the future. So
it's also a segue into what Steph is about to ask about, which I think is very important. And I'm not sure if we're going to agree or disagree on this, but in World War II, there was an absolute defined enemy. And there was almost, I would say, 80 to 90% agreement among the American population that these wars needed to be fought. That does not exist anymore, period. There is no legitimate conflict going on in the world right now that you would get, I wouldn't even say a majority. You might be able to get a consensus among certain political groups, but I don't believe there's any conflict right now that would justify an 80% backing of a war, just to start out.
Yeah, I want to just point out that, yes, I agree with that obviously there's no war today that most people will agree on. But there also are alternative statistics that say that the majority of Americans were not for getting into World War II. They were not for going to war with Germany. There were many, many, many Americans who said that we should still remain hands off even during World War II when we were facing, a legitimate threat. There were a lot of people who said, let's stay out of this. Let's mind our own business. And minding our own business, by the way, that's the philosophy of our founders.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is World War II was actually the inception of like kind of the studies on propaganda and mass propaganda and all that stuff. It was actually where it played out both in Germany, here in the United States, and all across the board. So that's an interesting point you bring up. So as we go forward, though, with a lack of a cohesive enemy, and yet still, obviously threats to our, national security here or there, how maybe Halsey can start off with this. How do you justify that principle that you say about going to war? How do you decide that in the modern era?
Are you talking about what I said before about casus belli?
The cause behind actually instituting a conflict.
So, I mean, this is, I'm sure, where we're going to greatly disagree. And that's, I'm all for foreign intervention, but I'm just not for kind of tender-hearted intervention. I think a casus belli is in 1979 when Iran declared us the Great Satan and has been actively pursuing weapons that they can use against us. They've used terrorist tactics against us. They foster terrorist groups against us. And to me, that is an act of war. It's not an isolated incident of a rogue group that's fighting us here and there in the streets. To me, that is an act of war.
What do you think, Tim?
Contrary to what many a Republican would have us believe, they say that Iran is the number one sponsor of Islamic. I know. I'm not saying you're a Republican. I'm saying that most people will hear on the news that the number one sponsor of Islamic terrorism is Iran. They're wrong. The number one sponsor for Islamic terrorism is the United States government.
I'm sure that'll be a bone of contention here, but
it's an oversimplification, but I agree with him.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. So
you're like, really? So please explain, Halsey. You take a moment to explain that to the audience, please.
I think that a lot of, and I hate using this term because I usually think it's a red herring, but in this case, I do think it's appropriate. It's a game of 4D chess. We have a whole bunch of bad actors on the stage, and in our idea, fostering either conflict between them or taking one side over another has been our foreign policy for a while now. And I totally agree that we have been arming the wrong people, we've been fostering the wrong wars, and we have been pushing our foreign policy onto small groups of people who always wind up turning it back on us because they think that they're just a cog in a bigger system, that we've gotten them in against their will. I don't think that it matters. I don't think that just because we know the root cause of it that we can't do that, we have to write off the effect. But I happen to agree with him 100% that America is by far the biggest state sponsor of Islamic terrorism.
So what you're saying, Halsey, is that you can simultaneously agree with the root cause, but yet support more of an interventionist foreign policy?
I just don't care. I don't care what the root cause is, to tell you the truth. I'm all for America using military might to enforce its either value system or its foreign policy on actors that it disagrees with. I have no problem with it. So, and that's what we said would be our biggest bone of, I have absolutely no problem with foreign intervention. I have a problem with the way it's carried out.
And Tim, if you have a problem with that, why do you have a problem with that?
Yeah, I have a problem with that. We're going to force our value system on people that don't have our value system. I mean, how do you expect to have foreign relations with people? These, people in the Middle East don't have the same values that we have. We live in America or Western civilization. And, we value property rights. We value freedom. We value, equality and, generally. We're trying to force those values on a civilization that doesn't have those values. That's a waste of time. Not just a waste of time, it's a waste of money and it's a waste of American lives.
But that's not what I said, though.
Okay, hold on. So let him finish his point and then you can hop in.
Sure.
No,
was that the end of your point?
For the most part. Go ahead.
What I said was I have no problem using American military might to enforce our value system. Maybe what I wasn't clear about was that you're right. The Constitution and our Republican form of government is a pact among citizens. It's a moral code that we have decided to live by in the United States of America. What I also say is that the majority of the world does not live by that social compact. The majority of the world makes policies and makes decisions at the point of a gun. And I have absolutely no problem with the end result of a conflict being that we get to dictate the terms as the winner. If they're not going to listen to diplomacy, if they're not going to listen to economic influence, if they're not going to listen to basically anything, and whether it's our own fault or not, come after us, then they're going to listen when we beat the fuck out of them.
But Halsey, isn't diplomacy or we're going to kick your ass like not really much of a choice?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you said, if they won't listen to diplomacy, but you're also saying that we're going to come in and steamroll them, even if they don't agree with us.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, and I take
at what cost? What are we trying to enforce on them? Or do we? I think that we're fighting over resources, and that's been basically what war has been about since the dawn of time, is that we're fighting over resources, whether it's land or people. And in this time and age, we're talking about lithium. We're talking about oil.
Can I give you an example, Tim, and then we can continue the debate. I'll just give you an example of what I'm talking about. Is that in terms of manufacturing, right? America has, I would say, allowed China to get around, I think it's 96% of contracts for rare earth on the planet, right? And we're okay with that. We're okay with that because China manufactures the majority of our goods. China has kind of been an ally for a while. We don't seem to want to really scrap with them and all of that. So we've allowed that to go on. Yes, we have our own rare earth resources here in America, but we're not currently going after them. We're not currently manufacturing them. We're allowing that to happen. But we've done that in a sense of we're not going to use our economic might nor our military might to be able to get those rare earth contracts. We're going to allow this to happen on the basis of it's a mutually beneficial pact. If they decide to use that as a weapon against us, such as if you don't do what we say, we will stop manufacturing shit and you will not have any more computers because we control the rare earth of the planet, then I have no problem using American military might to show them that that's not the case.
I think that's the wrong, it's just like it starts from the wrong conversation point. I'm saying we allow them to do things.
Yep.
Who are we to say that someone is allowed to do something and someone is not allowed to do something? Oh, you're allowed to mine these resources, but this other guy, he's not allowed. Based on what? Us? I mean,
no, based on the idea that if we wanted those contracts and wanted to do it ourselves, we have the economic might and we have the political influence to go get those contracts ourselves. Instead, we said to China, you can go get those contracts. We're not going to bid against you. We're not going to use the power that we have to take those contracts because we have a pact. You're going to be building a manufacturing base of which we are going to take advantage of. And we're okay with that. But that is a pact. It's a compact between countries. It's not that we allowed them like, hey, we're sitting on our throne and we can allow you to do it. It's that we could have easily bid against them and got them ourselves. Zimbabwe, which holds a vast majority of those rare earth contracts, they have no problem doing business with us. And they would easily do it. If we came in with a truckload of dollars, I'm sure they would take it over a truckload of yuan. But we allowed that to happen because we're okay with that. But when you violate that compact and you start using it as an economic weapon against us, then you better be ready to take it to the point of bullets because we will. That is what I'm okay with.
Is it safe to say, though, that, the truckload of dollars may become worth less and less and less over time because China and Russia have been stockpiling gold and been vying to be the world reserve currency?
Yes.
I don't know if we agree on that one or not. I don't believe that. I believe that gold is the same thing as currency. I don't believe it has any real inherent value. It's just a metal. Well,
it's just a metal, but it's also been currency for thousands of years. Gold is not just a metal, but the reason, you have to look back into, and Carl Menger talked about this in the Origins of Money, how the reason why we have gold is because of its unique characteristics. Gold is money. Gold is money because it doesn't depreciate. Like, it doesn't destroy. If I traded you a bag full of apples, in a month, those apples will be worthless because no one wants to eat rotten apples. But gold, that sticks around for a really long time. You can also press gold. So gold. No, this is important.
I agree.
We're talking about money here, and it's one of the key components of I think foreign policy, and I think it's one of the key components of national security, that gold has been currency for literally thousands of years, and we have gone away from a gold standard. And some countries are starting to initiate a gold standard back into their currency systems. The fact that we aren't leaves us at a disadvantage, and that's not a good thing, and it's not something to be taken lightly. I mean, look at the commercials. Look at the value of gold. It's just overwhelming.
What you're talking about is going to lead to what you advocate in the first place. If America is not on the gold standard, and America has decided to use its own currency as a standard while the rest of the world is adopting gold, then America is going to become more of a republic, because it's only going to be the only country that uses its own currency for value.
But that
I'm saying that if the rest of the world is a globalist cabal of gold, America can exist on its own, as I said, because it can be self-sustaining. America has the ability to totally
America is not self-sustaining.
Okay, stop fighting for a second, please. I want to make a point about gold as well, that I feel like, I think that the reason people differentiate gold from general currency is because gold is not simply an IOU. Gold is, there is a finite amount of it, at least a finite amount we can access that I know of. So it's going to have a different standard. So I kind of was confused, Halsey, when you just said that it's the same as money. No, I don't believe gold has inherent value in the sense that, ooh, it's sparkly, so people are going to like it. I think it has an inherent value because it's sparkly, it's been used for thousands of years, and there's X amount of it.
There's been tons of currencies that have been used for thousands of years. People have used spices. People have used paper money. People have used oil. People have used gold. There, any commodity that has a finite amount and has a value that can be traded is a currency. There's just because something has been done for thousands of years, there are a lot of things that have been done for thousands of years that aren't done anymore. Whale oil is a great example. That is completely worthless now, but was traded as a currency for thousands of years, or at least as a commodity. So what I'm saying is just because historically there has been a value placed on gold because it's a metal with finite value, doesn't mean that going into the future that gold has to be the standard of having finite value. There are a million different commodities that can possess value.
But not finite value. You said
sure there is. Oil is a great one.
Whale oil is not finite. It is.
Sure it is. There's only a certain amount of whales in the world,
and they reproduce, and they produce more oil.
They don't reproduce faster than we shoot them. They've been in for a really long time now. And gold is the same way. There's only a certain amount of it in the ground. Yes, we can go find more of it, but there's only a certain amount. Oil is the same way. Spices were the same way. There's always going to be a way to put a finite value on a component.
Please.
Hold on. I just put you guys on mute for a second. Okay. Yeah, I have the power. No, I do want to hear, you made a valid point, Halsey, that there are a lot of finite commodities in the world. So I want to hear Tim's rebuttal to that. What makes gold or silver or precious metals or things of that nature so valuable as opposed to some other finite commodity?
There aren't that many other finite commodities in reality. Oil isn't really, at this point, it's kind of infinite because we don't know how much we can drill up. But spices, as Halsey had mentioned, are certainly infinite. You can always make more spices. You can always have more whales that produce oil. You can always have more sheep. You can always have more chickens. You can always have more eggs.
Okay, but let's say,
the thing about gold is that we can't have more of it.
Okay, yeah. So say there were some other finite resources that we could name right here that people would ascribe value to. So is it just gold is traditionally just associated with money?
No, that's not. It doesn't even have anything to do with tradition. It's why has it traditionally been associated with money? Because you can press it, you can stamp it, you can divide it into very, very small pieces. It doesn't deteriorate over time. It's a metal, and it doesn't rust. It doesn't corrode. That's why it has been used as money, and that's why gold completely obliterates any other currency. And that's why even in today's time, you look at the commodities markets where people are trading gold and silver. I mean, they're trading billions of dollars of gold daily. it's not a joke like, oh, well, gold is just some silly little metal that, no one really cares about anymore. No, people are trading billions of dollars worth of this stuff. They're not trading billions of dollars worth of whale oil or spices. Gold is unique. And there's a reason that not just Russia, not just China, but even the Republic of Texas is stockpiling gold. Why aren't they stockpiling spices? Why aren't they stockpiling whale oil? I don't know, but they seem to be stockpiling gold. So that's what I want to be invested in. And
Halsey, does Tim have a point there? I mean, that these countries are stockpiling these resources.
I as I've said from the beginning, I don't say that gold is not a form of currency. I believe that all commodities are a form of currency. And I also believe that what he left out about gold was that gold doesn't really have a commercial use, which is why it does now. But back in the day, gold was more of a metal that they weren't going to use for anything but currency or value. It's like a diamond used to just be a pretty stone. Now it's used in all kinds of industrial applications. You didn't have to worry about someone taking a gold coin and making a transistor out of it. So you were able to take a metal that had value, had finite amount, and did not have to be used in the time of crisis or anything like that to manufacture things, which is what gave gold an absolute value, which I'm still saying exists. But what I'm saying is that any commodity, and by the way, the spice market is still worth billions of dollars. So yes, there are people trading billions of dollars worth of spices. Whale oil was an example of a commodity that's now extinct. It doesn't even have any value anymore. But what I'm saying is that gold does have a value because other countries ascribe value to it. Other countries trade with each other in it. I'm not saying it has no value. What I'm saying is it has a value that people ascribe to it like any other commodity. We also have that commodity called our paper money. People are willing to ascribe a certain level of value of it. Could that change? Absolutely. But so could the price of gold. So could the price of anything. The American economy could falter tomorrow and our currency could be worthless. Or China, Russia, and all the other who are operating on more of a gold-based currency could do the same. And gold would all of a sudden have a glut and be finding itself lower in value. I'm saying that any type of thing that you ascribe value to has the ability to be used as a currency.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I would agree on some points that yes, value is subjective, that the reason why we use gold as money is because everyone sees it as money. But it still is very unique. If you want to put it against a fiat currency, I think commodity-backed currencies against fiat currencies have held their own throughout thousands of years. And fiat currencies you can print and governments can manipulate, whereas gold, well, you can't print it. You can print gold certificates, and that's just kind of like a bubble waiting to burst. Mm-hmm. But gold is a more solid investment, especially when we're talking about the world over. Poor people in these little rundown villages and things, they're not looking for dollars at the end of the day. They want gold.
What you're doing, I'm sorry, Tim, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
What you're overlooking by you keep bringing back that it's been done for thousands of years. And what has also been done for thousands of years is exactly what I said before. When a country or an empire like Rome was starting to run out of gold in order to foster their lavish spending and all of that, they just went in and took it from whoever they wanted to. So the idea that like they can be trading in gold and we're going to sit back and watch our dollar crumble and we're going to sit back and passively starve to death because everybody's in gold and we're using dollars is proving the point that I made before. If it comes down to it, America is not going to sit back and starve and watch everybody else prosper. America will use the military might that it's invested in since 1945 to achieve its goals. So what I'm saying is that while, yes, there is a movement towards gold, yes, there is an alliance of different countries against America, I don't believe that America is going to sit back and allow itself to fall into the kind of apathy and dereliction that Rome did at this point. I'm not saying it won't happen in the future. In fact, it's my biggest fear. But at the same time, I don't believe that's happening now.
Steph, did you have a question?
No, I didn't. I just wanted to say, I think maybe it might be time to move on from the currency stuff. If
I'm happy to do so. Tim, you good?
I'm
fine with that.
very good points on that for sure. I've learned a lot from it. So let's just maybe continue the next question.
Okay. Well, the next topic that I wanted to talk about, because we kind of touched on the economics and war, and we kind of touched on the foreign policy as far as, your differences on that. We touched on it a little bit. One of the other topics I wanted to talk about tonight, though, was an area of somewhat disagreement with between you two, nuclear proliferation. Now, Tim, I want you to start off this topic because I think you have kind of a unique perspective, and I still don't know what I think about it yet, but I would like to kind of have you sum up, you speculate that the world would be safe with more nukes rather than less.
Oh, that's a good one.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I had, I did a little research, and it turns out that I'm not the only person that has made this argument, but it's an argument that certainly isn't heard in mainstream media. And it's saying that actually increased nuclear proliferation would mean a more peaceful world. If you look at the wars that have actually gone on since we developed nuclear weapons, they've all been between either two countries who neither have nukes or one country and another who doesn't. So like America and Russia aren't going to go to war. Why? Because they'll blow us up and we'll blow them up. And neither of us want that. And the same thing goes for, Britain and France. They've had a million different scuffles throughout the years. Why aren't they going to war now? There's a lot of different reasons, but one reason is that, well, they both have nukes, so they don't want to go to war. And it's kind of goes back to the really simplistic, like individual kind of thinking is my neighbor has a gun, so I'm not going to rob him. And he knows that I have a gun, so he's not going to rob me. An armed society is a polite society, that kind of thing. And I think that if we had more countries with nukes, we might have a more polite world. It's an interesting view. It's a unique one. It's not really talked about. But if some of these countries that we really don't like had nukes, what they develop nukes for isn't really offensive purposes. The only country that's ever used nuclear weapons for offense has been the United States. All the other countries that have developed them since then have used them as a reason for other countries not to attack them. Like, hey, we're China, don't attack us because we have nukes. Or we're Israel, don't attack us because we have nukes. And, you'll have little skirmishes and whatnot. Little terrorist groups are always shooting rockets into Israel and whatnot. But an actual country going to war with Israel? No. I think that human nature overcomes a lot of religious ideology, and that there might be some radical Islamists that are like, yeah, we're going to blow Israel off the face of the earth. But there are also more people and more powerful people that are saying, I don't know if I want that, because that's going to mean that my whole country is like decimated. Granted, Israel will be decimated too, but we're going to be decimated. I think that
All right.
The theory of mutually assured destruction, MAD, is actually something that people don't take into account a lot of times. And I think it works in an individual level. Like, I'm not going to get into a fight with this other big guy because he might beat me up. Like, we're both going to be hurt at the end of this fight. So I'm not going to start a fight. And I think it also works when we're talking about nation states.
Okay. So Halsey, nuclear proliferation, would it be an equalizing force in the world? Would people be less have less propensity to use them against each other? Would it overcome human nature?
No, MAD was proven to not work. What happened is that everybody operated under the assumption that MAD was going to work, and it did for a very long time, because the assumption was that if America and the Soviet Union went to war, nuclear, that both countries would be absolutely destroyed. In the 80s, Reagan basically said to the Soviets, no, we would survive, and started an arms race that bankrupted the Soviet Union. And it was under a guise of what's not called MAD, it's called SAD, which is strategically assured destruction. If North Korea, let's say, had a full nuclear arsenal, right, and they were to use that arsenal, let's say they had, 40 nukes, right, and 40 weapons capable of delivering them somewhere in the United States. 40 nuclear explosions in the United States would suck, and a lot of people would die, but the United States wouldn't be destroyed. It wouldn't be over. America launching 40 nuclear weapons at North Korea turns North Korea into a parking lot. So there is no real benefit to them having nukes, because we would say, oh, well, we're not going to shoot nukes at them because they might shoot them back at us. Secondly, you used a great example of Britain, France, Israel, and America. What our doctrine is based on is the nuclear triad, which is guaranteed second strike capability. Is that if North Korea fired a nuke at us, and let's say they fired 100 nukes at us, and we're able to literally take out all of our land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, right? We still have submarines at sea that would deliver a guaranteed second strike. So no matter whether they destroyed us or not, or destroyed at least our capability of using our intercontinental ballistic missiles, we would still be able to use our sea-based bombers to launch nuclear weapons against them and our submarines. So unless we're talking about literally evening the playing field among nuclear powers and giving them the level of military that we have, or that Britain and France as a part of NATO, or Israel has that it's developed on its own, there is no mutually assured destruction. It's only strategically assured destruction.
Okay, Tim. So what do you, I might have a point after that I want to ask.
Can I actually address something Tim said where I do kind of agree with him, though? Iran does not want a nuclear weapon so that they can nuke Israel. Don't get me wrong. If they found a way to kind of slip one to a terrorist group in hopes that they would drive it into Israel and use it, they would do it. But I don't believe that they would do that, A, because no one would doubt where it came from, and B, because I just don't think they're that stupid. Yes, there might be, like, if ISIS got a nuclear bomb, they would do that. But ISIS isn't getting a nuclear bomb anytime soon. So not unless they buy one, and we would know it. So yes, I agree that the reason they want it is a nuclear umbrella to enforce their kind of diktats in their next to the woods. Iran wants a nuclear weapon to deter Saudi Arabia, or they want Saudi Arabia to pull the Soviet Union and bankrupt themselves trying to develop their own.
Well, the point I was going to make is my fear with the nuclear proliferation argument. I get what Tim's saying completely, that if everybody is on a truly even playing field, which I'm sure he will address why we are or not, if everybody has mutually assured destruction, will people attack each other? And I think that makes a lot of sense. However, we're also looking at a world of, relatively coherent governments that will abide by that. My fear is about, as you said, if ISIS could nuke Israel, I'm sure they would do so. And I don't think they'd care if they die. What is if we continue to make the world so full of nukes? What happens if the world changes and these ideological nut jobs of Islamic persuasion, or I don't know, say the North Koreans go crazy and decide they don't care if they die? What is going to stop world destruction from this? It just kind of it makes me wonder. What do you think about that, Tim?
I have a feeling we're going to agree on this one, but Tim, please.
Yeah. Well, I'd say, we've had nukes in the world for not centuries, but decades now, yeah. And we haven't had that problem. Russia has been doing lots of different weapons trade with plenty of radical groups in the Middle East, and yet they've never allowed a nuclear weapon. I mean, Russia works with Iran. Russia works with Syria, but they've somehow never managed to give them nuclear weapons. So why would they? As long as these weapons are in the hands of actual governments and people who care about them and are responsible with them, then it doesn't seem to be a problem. The same way, as long as we have firearms that are in the hands of responsible citizens, it's not an issue. It's only an issue when they're in the hands of a bad guy. So the solution to that isn't that we get rid of firearms completely, because we know, that's not going to work. How are you going to do that? And it also means that trying to, everyone needs to get rid of their nuclear supply of weapons. Who's going to obey that? No one is. No one smart enough is going to just I'll give up my nukes as long as you give up yours. Who goes first? How are we going to deal with this? It's a ridiculous issue.
There's three things that Tim just said, though, that just need to be clarified. I happen to agree with him on almost everything that he just said. There's three things. One, the reason a state wouldn't give a nuclear weapon, like Russia wouldn't sell a nuclear weapon to a terrorist organization, is because everyone can tell where a nuclear weapon was built. It has a signature in it of the uranium that's mined and processed that you can literally tell where the heavy water came from. So if Russia gave one to, let's say, Hamas in Gaza, we would know it was Russia. And so would Israel. And at the time, and if you want to see a nuclear war, you give a nuclear weapon to a terrorist group. Secondly, the argument about everybody having guns deters people from shooting guns has never made the argument that we should give the criminals guns. It's the argument that they're going to try to get them in the first place. So us having overwhelming force to use against them is appropriate to deter them. So I agree with that 100%, but it shoots the mad argument in the foot. And thirdly, I don't see how a nuclear arms race is going to help anybody, because it's just going to make us develop better bombs. If Iran, North Korea, and Saudi Arabia, and South Africa, and everybody started developing nukes, we're just going to develop better nukes or better missiles for shooting them out of the sky or anything. No one is going to sit back and say, well, I think it's safe that if they can kill us and we can kill them, that it's going to be all good in the world.
Tim, any response to that?
Well, I like that he agreed with me on most of my points.
It's always fun when that happens. You guys.
Yeah, I mean, Halsey and I agree on probably 90% of issues. But I don't have any response.
Well, and to be clear, we're also talking about like the proliferation of nukes. We're not talking about just, the current state of them. And, I'm not a statistics major, but, the more, nuclear weapons you have in the world, and the longer the period of time, just because it hasn't happened, just because we've kept a check on it right now, doesn't mean it wouldn't happen in the future. Say Russia crumbles into anarchy or something like that, their economy collapses or whatever, or maybe America's a more pertinent example.
Well, they kind of already did that, though.
That already happened.
Like they did that when the Soviet Union collapsed, and magically no nuclear weapons fell into the hands of, some strange little offshoots of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, but in fairness, look at the prevalence of, extremist Islamic groups now as opposed to during the era of the Soviet Union. They were just coming in.
Can you repeat the point? Because I think I want to address it separately, but I'm not sure what the point you're getting at is.
The point is that, just because we've opened the Pandora's box and we have, nukes in the world, should we multiply them and make sure everyone has nukes? Because, statistically, the more nukes that are in the world, the more probability that there is, and I'm probably offending all the statistics majors, but
yeah, Ken's probably yelling in the chat.
But the more likely it'll be that nuclear attacks will happen.
I don't think we live in a movie. I don't think that is more likely, nor the only country that has what the defense industry calls the Islamic bomb is Pakistan. And Pakistan, hasn't miniaturized, so they're not deliverable in any way except for basically by truck. So they're not capable of selling a nuclear weapon. Besides, I think we probably, I wouldn't know for sure, but I would assume that we have enough satellites trained on Pakistan that we know where every single one of their nuclear bombs is. We know every single time they manufacture one. We know the rate at which they can manufacture them. And not to mention, we probably have, 80% of their military on our payroll. So I'm not really concerned with an Islamic bomb as of right now. I could be, because of something we were talking about the other day with North Korea and Iran. But that's, if you want me to go down that rabbit hole, I'm happy to, but that's different.
But isn't the nature of technology and whatnot, the longer it's around, the easier it is to access, especially when it comes to, sciences that, have been around for a long time, and then we develop and improve on them.
It's again that it goes back to what we were talking about the other day. I did a really fun cast with Tom about this. Is that the nuclear cycle that goes from I want a nuclear weapon to I have a deliverable nuclear weapon, while exceptionally complicated scientifically to accomplish, is not unpredictable, nor is it difficult in its steps. You know what every step is. First, you have to enrich uranium to a point or develop enough plutonium to have nuclear fuel. Then you have to develop basically a device, a bomb capable of blowing up, and you have to test that bomb. Okay, but that's not deliverable. You can't use it for anything. It's about the size of a truck.
The point that sorry, continue.
Well, wait, let me just finish real quick, Seth. Okay. Next, you have to develop a ballistic missile that you're going to use to deliver it, and then use that data from the ballistic missile to develop a miniaturized nuke, put it on the ballistic missile, and test it. So you can stop a player at any step along those ways because you know that they have to go through that in order to make it work.
My issue with the another issue I find with the nuclear weapons argument, I think, as Josh noted, it's a Pandora's box. I think, unfortunately, I kind of wish we just never invented this technology in the first place, because it brings the possibility of a lot of world-ending danger. But now that we have it, a question I sort of have is it necessarily just about whether or not country A can actually use their nuke on country B, or is it a matter of what will happen to the world if this? You look at the things that happen when we have even like a nuclear reactor breakdown. What could be the impact on a huge portion of the world if a nuke is used anywhere? You know, it's not just, are we going to blow up the entire planet? Is it, what if country A nukes country B and we have a environmental disaster that will last for the next 500 years? Two things. One,
you're watching too many movies. Even the biggest nuclear bombs don't create those levels of environmental catastrophe. They do right where they're exploded, but that's usually like between a 15 and 20 mile radius. It's like, it would be like Chernobyl. It gets blocked off. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just gets evacuated, and those areas are just not accessed anymore. So, and the one thing that we're not addressing, that I'm waiting for Tim to jump in on it, and if he doesn't, I'm going to now, the danger from ISIS and from Islamic groups using nukes is actually incredibly negligible. The real danger is them using germ warfare and chemical warfare, because those are exceptionally easy.
Yes, I just want to make one point about the Chernobyl thing, or just a question. I honestly, a lot of these points I'm bringing up in this debate are to play devil's advocate. Foreign policy is not really my expert thing. I'm here to learn as well. But the thing with Chernobyl, I have to wonder, is that was not a place that was in an ocean or near an ocean. I think a more comparable example would be Fukushima, which seemed to have pretty far-reaching consequences, because, you know, when you're in an ocean, that water is going to continue to move. Do you think there's any legitimacy to that, depending where it happens? I think Chernobyl, yes, you can more or less contain that if it's in the middle of the forest, but would that be the same in a
you do realize that all of our nuclear tests, which I think were 60, and I think Russia had 110, were all done over the ocean or in the atmosphere, and we haven't really experienced any ill effect from it. It's really kind of a red herring to talk about the environmental effects of nuclear weapons. It's more of a movie thing. I'm just telling you from knowledge of studying it that there is no, unless you use a massive military strike, I mean, of like 50, 60 nuclear warheads, the environmental disaster is really confined to the area where the bomb blew up.
Fair enough.
I might kind of a little bit disagree with that, considering the meltdown that happened it wasn't a nuclear weapon, but there was a giant meltdown that happened in Japan, and they're still seeing side effects. People are the cancer rate has increased. All sorts of things. It wasn't intentional. It was a complete accident.
But we're going to completely agree on that one, because a meltdown is completely different than a nuclear explosion. A nuclear explosion eats up a good portion of the radiation in the blast.
So yeah, this might be more of a scientific argument that I don't understand. As you said, maybe
that's why I'm saying it's a rabbit hole that we shouldn't really go down, because it's not. I've never seen a real and I've studied this for a long time. I've never seen a real scientific study that says that a singular nuclear strike would be an environment, unless you used a neutron bomb, which is invented to create an environmental catastrophe.
Okay.
But other than that, I haven't seen a study that shows it would be a environmental catastrophe to use a nuclear weapon.
Well, and while it would be a fun banter, I think, it does kind of step away. It's a legitimate question to ask, but it would kind of step away from the original. Would proliferation, actually people possessing nukes, more countries possessing nukes, actually make the world a safer place? And it kind of correlates.
I can give a personal example if it helps, Josh. I spent some time. I've worked for various news organizations, and I spent 10 years in Jerusalem. Okay, and not using a nuclear argument, just using a conventional one. The argument always was that if the other side from Israel, the Palestinians, had certain weapons, they would use them, and that Israel would be more likely to come to the negotiating table due to kind of more of an even-handed amount of weapons. So Hamas put this to the test by developing rockets that they can shoot into Israel and basically terrify civilians. So Israel developed the Iron Dome, which basically nullified those rockets. Hezbollah decided to build up 200,000 rockets on Israel's border. So Israel developed the David Sling, which is to stop intermediate range missiles. So the argument that just because you have a weapon that can be used doesn't mean that the other side with better resources, better scientific technology can't counter that is a little bit shaky.
Tim, did you have any last thoughts on the topic? Because I want to move on to the
I think we should move on if we can, unless Tim does have any thoughts.
I don't have any last thoughts, but unless you're moving in a direction that's completely different than mine, I think I'd like to get into the morality of war.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'm going in a different direction, but okay. How would you like to start that? Because
I'm not really sure what you mean by that either.
Yeah, bombs are immoral. If we're talking about, the non-aggression principle, that means that you're not allowed to fight me. And the only reason I'm allowed to hurt you is if you're trying to hurt me. Bombs are so indiscriminate that they kill millions of innocent people who have nothing to do with me. And I find that immoral. I think that some of the arguments that are put forth was with regard to taking care of, perceived threats like North Korea. We're saying, well, let's just bomb the shit out of them. I mean, who cares? Like, we'll wipe North Korea out, or we'll wipe out Syria, or we'll wipe out anybody. How many innocent people are we killing? Is that moral to do? Not only is it moral, but is it pragmatic? I think in the long run, like with the Syria strikes, for instance, when America struck the Syrian air bases where we said, the different gas attacks were launched from, we didn't kill anyone from the Syrian army. We didn't kill any ISIS members. We didn't kill any Russians. Everyone was evacuated from there. The only people that died were innocent civilians, 4 of whom were children. Like, wait a minute. We just attacked this air base and all we did was kill innocent people? What? Wait. And those, I think there were 4 children. There were 7 people total, 4 of whom were children. And now we're wondering why people hate us. Gosh,
wait, so is this kind of tying back into like the interventionist policy, or just is this a completely different topic that you wanted to address? I think you and Halsey might disagree on.
I don't know if we necessarily disagree on it, but I think that a lot of the interventionism is, not necessarily like the root cause of terrorism. And I'm not like a 9/11 apologist or anything like that, where I'm saying, well, 9/11 is our fault because, we were over there. I'm not saying that because, there's no justification for killing 3,000 Americans. At the same time, there's no justification for killing thousands of them. Madeleine Albright admitted in an interview, in a live interview, that the Iraq sanctions that Bill Clinton placed on Iraq killed 500,000 children. And the interviewer said, do you think that was worth it? And Madeleine Albright said, yeah, I think it was. 500,000 kids. That's just the kids. That's just the kids. We say, yeah, it's worth it to kill 500,000 kids. Well, what? They all have RPGs strapped to their back or something? Why is that worth it? There is a moral argument to take. And when we can talk about, well, is this good or is this bad? What kind of position does this, leave America in, or nuclear proliferation? But I think that as human beings, it's also very important to say, is this right? Is this right to do? Is it right to kill innocent people? And in a lot of cases, it's just like, what's the, there's a moral case to be made against war. It's not all like libertarianism and saying, well, non-aggression principle.
Okay.
And then we talk about, I'll keep going.
Yeah. So were you just finishing that up, or?
No, I was going to keep going a sec. It's not all about pragmatism and saying that, is this good or bad as far as strategy goes, but also on a human level. Is it a right thing to do? Is it worth it? Is it worth it to kill innocent people in order to take out a bad guy? We could take out Kim Jong-un. We could absolutely do it. Is it worth it to kill a few thousand completely innocent? They don't, the North Koreans, by and large, their army is paid and they're propagandized. They don't know what the hell they're doing. They're just told, and they take their orders and they go with them. But this is the army. We're talking about civilians. We're talking about human lives, people that have nothing. They don't have anything to win in this. And we're saying that it's worth it to kill them.
So this is sort of the pragmatic politics versus like the realistic or realism politics debate versus principled politics or things of that nature. Which the two are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but in some cases, like you can differentiate. So Halsey, did you have any thoughts on what Tim kind of just went in? Does that kind of go against some of your mentalities as far as, America first, and, we've got to do what we have to do to preserve our country first? I'm just curious as to your thoughts.
The thing is, Tim said a lot of different things just now, and there's some that I completely couldn't agree more with, and there's some that I couldn't disagree more with. When you say we could take Kim Jong-un out and wind up killing a couple thousand civilians, or however many, I don't care what the number is, you could make it 100,000 civilians. My opinion isn't going to change. Is that if we say that Kim Jong-un is a threat to America, not a threat to his own people, or if we decide that we actually start to care about his own people, then I would say it's worth the civilian toll to take him out. Yes, absolutely. Do I think that sanctions on Iraq were a good idea? No, because there was no point to it. That by putting sanctions on anybody, there's no point to it. Sanctions are a declaration of war against someone that can't fight back. So when you say to like Saddam Hussein, we're going to put sanctions on you and therefore you won't be able to sell your oil. Like, do you think he suffered at all? Of course he didn't. He had palaces and concubines and lavish feasts and whatever he wanted while his people starved. But at the same time, I would think that taking him out to give their country a shot is way more better for the civilians of his country. And it goes back to the same principle that I talked about earlier, again, down the rabbit hole of World War II. Would it have been better for those individuals that were killed? And my family are Holocaust survivors, so I'm not saying this lightly, that would it have been better for those rail cars that never made it to Auschwitz if we bombed the lines? Yes, it would have been better for those distinct people. But the millions that were being killed all over Germany, and that Germany was aggressively going into other countries, could only be stopped by stopping Germany. That had to be the primary. And I look at it today, the analogy that I like to use today is ISIS, is that all the time we hear about bombing this or bombing that with ISIS is going to kill innocent civilians. But I guarantee you, Tim, Josh, Steph, and every single person who hates me in this chat room has seen the videos of the sex slaves, of the people who are being tortured and thrown off buildings, and the horrid shit that they're doing to these people. Living under that is way worse to me than the idea that we're going to step back and let it happen because we're not going to stop it. Because we might hurt innocent civilians.
Okay. I want to jump in. Yeah. We've seen like the horrible videos and all of this kind of stuff. I've also seen the 100% fake videos, the videos where they blow up a car and then they run in a bunch of actors, and those actors lay down on the ground and pretend that they're casualties.
Can you be more specific? Because I'm not sure what you're talking. I think I do, but I just want to clarify what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's
like who does that and why?
Why do they do it? I'm not
who?
sure.
I'm asking like who, are you like, you're saying that people make the fake, who makes the fake videos? Because if we're talking about like ISIS, you mean, or?
No, I'm talking about the CIA. The CIA makes fake videos of ISIS attacks and says, look at this horrible terrorist attack. And then there are also leaked videos of the attack, and it shows that the truck was exploded beforehand. Then a bunch of people ran in after the fact, laid on the ground, and pretended to be injured or killed because of it. You can look up fake videos of those white helmet assholes doing stuff. I'm not sure that I believe 100% of what I see. They say the Middle East is just this complete war zone, but there are a lot of fake videos out there that portray it as a war zone. I'm not sure that everything I see is real, and because I doubt that, it means that I'm going to have less of a justification for actually going in there.
I can't really address that because I could either concede that that's true and that, oh well, or I can concede that I just don't have like the evidence to say that it is or isn't happening, or that I personally care, to tell you the truth. Like, if the CIA is doing that, then that is a domestic issue that needs to be tackled immediately. But I'm saying it doesn't affect my opinion on foreign policy at all. So I don't know how you want me to address that.
No, I mean, you can look it up. It's all over the internet. The U.S. government, the CIA, the Pentagon paid $500 million to a British firm to create fake Al-Qaeda recruiting videos.
Okay, the point I want to make with that is that, yes, I have actually seen a lot of these videos, and I actually agree with you. There are certain instances where I've watched this and I'm like, really? And I think that is true, that it is likely that somebody, I'm not going to accuse specifically the CIA or whoever, but there are people who will use these fake things to provoke a certain action. However, I think it would be incredibly naive to assume that because that happens, that the Middle East isn't really as bad as a lot of people say it is. Yes, there are parts of the Middle East that are not a living hell. However, I have enough, friends who have served in the Middle East and stuff to know that some of the things that go on are worse than any video you've seen. Stories I've heard about, soldiers from Afghanistan or Iraq, some of these people, as you said, these people are living under just absolutely horrific conditions. And I kind of wonder where the line is, where, as Halsey said earlier, where is the line where you are doing something today that may improve lives tomorrow? I think the argument is where the line is, not whether or not we agree. I don't think anyone's going to say there is never a time that collateral damage is justified. It's when and how much and what for.
I mean, it's basically an argument. And as I said, it's more personal for me because I lived through it. In that when I was in Israel and there were these rocket attacks, right? And I remember that a big thing of the more leftist media was that the response to those rocket attacks could result in civilian deaths. And whenever somebody asked me about it, I said, and I would repeat about America or anywhere else, that every second I spend giving a shit about their civilians is a second that I'm not spending giving a shit about my own. And I'm sorry, when it comes down to whether my civilians live or your civilians live, there's no argument to be had as far as I'm concerned.
Got anything, Tim, or should we go on to the next topic?
No, I think that that is an important distinction between myself and Halsey, where he views American citizens as different than the citizens of another country. I don't view people as citizens, and I'm not a nationalist. Hillary Clinton was a globalist, and I think she was attacked rightfully because Hillary Clinton is a globalist. Donald Trump is a nationalist, and I think that is also wrong, because I view the individual as the most important part of society. It's the individual that matters, and it doesn't matter where they live, and that individual life matters no matter where they are.
But can I respond to that for 1 second? I'll put it on the individual level then, is that when I was sitting there and there were rockets coming at me and the Iron Dome system was used to intercept those rockets, I remember seeing news reports that we had to, stop defending ourselves against the rockets and stop bombing the other side because, after all, it was mean. And yes, I could look at everybody as a civilian, but those rockets were coming at my kids. Like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to look at them with some level of compassion of, oh, we're all citizens and we're all together, when they're trying to kill my kids. And they can make the same argument as towards me. They could say, well, you're sitting there and you're coming at my kids. Okay, fuck it. Then let's throw down and whoever wins, wins. But I'm not going to let you shoot rockets at my kids. I have a video, I could probably find it right now, of rockets coming up and then the missiles going up and intercepting them. You think I didn't cheer for those missiles? I mean, I had kids that were crying in a bomb shelter because sirens were going off, and I'm supposed to give a shit about their kids? No, I just wouldn't do it. I just can't do it.
You can tweet the video out. I want to get on to the next topic, which was, and I'm interested to know if you guys disagree or agree or what on this topic. But recently, well, actually, just today where Donald Trump delivered a speech in Saudi Arabia? And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't really follow him too closely, but he delivered a speech in Saudi Arabia, and recently they
drive them out of your places of worship. Drive them out of your communities. Drive them out of your holy land, and drive them out of this earth.
Okay, so
for our part.
And then we recently, what was it? Signed a $110 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia. I want
350.
Oh, all in total. Okay. Some of the headlines said 110 billion, but maybe all said and done, it's 350. So whoever wants to start on this can, as far as stating their opinion. I don't have a preference whether it's Tim or Halsey.
Yeah, I'll go first. Foreign policy or foreign aid is essentially stealing from the poor in America to give to the rich in other countries. I think foreign aid is bullshit. I think that it's morally wrong because you're stealing from people in America to give to other people. And I think theft is morally wrong. And I think that by and large, it doesn't benefit us on a national security basis. We give tons of money to Saudi Arabia. We fund them endlessly. And what do they return to us? Well, they give us various intelligence, they say, and different things. And we claim that we can count on them as an ally in the Middle East. I don't know if you can really count on Saudi Arabia as an ally in the Middle East. I think that it's a giant scam, that the reason we fund Saudi Arabia is basically because they're the number one buyer of American arms. We give them money so that they keep buying our guns. Like America buys a ton of guns for its own military. The number two buyer of American firearms and American military equipment is Saudi Arabia. It has nothing. I mean, look at the 9/11 hijackers. The 9/11 hijackers weren't from Iraq or Pakistan or Afghanistan. They were from Saudi Arabia. So now we're going to claim that they're our ally. They're our ally because they're an OPEC nation.
Halsey?
I'm not. Can I have just a little clarification? We're talking about the arms deal, or we're talking about foreign aid?
Well, I had started off prefaced it with the Saudi arms deal, which was most recent. So
let's start with
foreign aid. I happen to agree with Tim somewhat. I think that foreign aid is more of an economic tool. I think it's something we use to influence policy, but I do happen to agree that it's more of a giveaway. I think there's some allies that when we do give military aid, there's more of an internal component to it here in America, but it's not really. I don't think it's really something that I would argue so much on. Like Israel's a great example. We give a ton of foreign aid to Israel, but they have to spend all of that foreign aid in America. So it's not just a giveaway of money to them. It's basically a more socialistic kind of jobs program here. And I would argue that Israel has not benefited from that relationship. I think that it's caused America to have a level of undue influence on the country that I think has caused it to do a lot of things that are not in its own interest. But in terms of the Saudi arms deal, I don't know how I feel about it, because Saudi Arabia is a very odd actor in the world stage. He's 100% right. The 9/11 attackers came from Saudi Arabia. There's definitely some really bad people in Saudi Arabia. I don't think the Saudi Arabian government is necessarily our friend, But at the same time, it's not being given to them. They're buying it. They're buying the weapons from us. And the reason we're doing it isn't because of their oil. It's to do it as a counterbalance to Iran. So, I mean, we can talk about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I don't think that the weapons deal in and of itself, I'm either for or against. I think that it's just kind of like a deal.
Well, let's talk about if it's a good or a bad thing then.
I think it's a bad thing. I mean, he talked about how, well, we give them money, but they use that money to buy guns from us. So it helps create our jobs. That's stimulus.
Can we go in
Keynesianism? That's wrong.
I agree with you. That's why I'm agreeing with you on that. So I'm just saying that it's a different scenario than, because you had talked about foreign aid as a whole. And I'm saying that there are each different country that receives American foreign aid. It's a different circumstance. I'm talking about the Saudi deal, like just as of now, because that's what we were asked about. Again, I don't really consider it a good or a bad thing per se. I don't believe that Saudi Arabia is going to turn those weapons over to like civilians. It's basically just a power play to keep in power, to keep oil flowing into our coffers. And as I said, a counterbalance against Iran. In a sense, it's really kind of protecting our own interests because they're going to use those weapons to protect the oil fields, which we own a decent amount of. But I don't necessarily think it's a good thing either, because I don't think Saudi Arabia being armed to the teeth is a good thing. But again, I don't know if being a counterbalance to Iran, if I can completely disagree with it either.
Tim, does Iran need to be counterbalanced?
No. I mean, not by us. I think they'll be counterbalanced in their own world by their neighbors in due time. It's not something that America has to step its foot in and say, Iran, you can or can't do this and that. That never really ends well. And that's basically, American imperialism. We're being the policeman of the world. Iran can do certain things, but they can't do other things. They can develop certain types of nuclear technology, but they can't develop other types of nuclear technology. And where does it lead? I think it leads to mass confusion and at best. And I think Halsey will agree with me on this point, because our foreign policy is, of course, led by politicians. So at best, you could characterize American foreign policy as schizophrenic.
I would completely agree with that statement. And the one thing that I would disagree with, though, is on what we do in Iran being a police action, in that we allow them to do certain things and not do certain things. We talked about this, actually, and we do very much agree that if America is going to go to war, there has to be a declaration of war, that there has to be a case brought before Congress. Congress has to vote and authorize the commander-in-chief to wage war, and the commander-in-chief has to do that with all due efficiency. That being said, from what I personally have written about and what I've seen in Iran, is that basically what we're doing is saying, if you don't want that to happen, this is what we're going to do. Because we see Iran developing an offensive nuclear capability as a cause for war. Whether we agree with that or not, we could talk about that later. But what I'm saying is that seems to be what we're telling Iran, is that if you move to develop a nuclear weapon, we will consider that an act of war and we will actually come after you. So,
how is that an act of war?
How is it? It depends. As I said, I agreed with you already that politicians are running this and that they're schizophrenic at best. So, no, I don't necessarily say I agree that it's an act of war. I'm saying that's the way it's being looked at from the levels of power.
Yeah, that's the way they're looking at it, is saying, I think this is something that, really needs to be more debated among the American public, is what is an act of war? Is striking an airbase in a foreign nation, is that an act of war? Is that basically a declaration of war? I don't know. I mean, we can flip it and say that if Syria struck an American airbase, would we consider that a declaration of war? I'm pretty sure we would. Meanwhile,
Absolutely.
we do it and we say that it's not an act of war. It's a one win. We just did a one time. It's a small strike, nothing big. It's not an actual declaration of war. I don't know. I mean, you flip it and you're just like, obviously, this is an act of war. This is a declaration of war. America is at war with Syria. How do you know? We struck Syria. And then you take it back and you say, well, we basically declared war, but we didn't actually officially have a congressional declaration of war. So I made the argument before and I said, well, if you want all the liberals are clamoring about how Donald Trump should be impeached for this and that and this and that. Donald Trump, if you want to impeach him, say, dude, you declared war without a congressional authorization.
He's able to do that by law. There was a thing called the War Powers Act. He can wage war for 90 days, 60 days for offensive capability, and 30 days for safe withdrawal without an authorization from Congress.
Yeah,
so legally, he's justified in doing it. I'm just saying he couldn't be impeached for it.
The War Powers Act has never been brought up before the Supreme Court.
Agreed. But what I'm saying is that as of right now, it's the law of the land. The Supreme Court, if they overruled it and the government decided to accept that overruling, then we could talk about it. But what I'm saying is that as far as it being an impeachable offense, the law of the land is that he can do it. So
he can't. I think that it's under the War Powers Act, which is unconstitutional. He can do it. If we go strictly by the Constitution, he can't do it. It's just.
You want to get into a minutia argument with me for a minute?
Not really.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that basically our judicial system has completely failed us. The Supreme Court has said, we're not going to really uphold the Constitution. The War Powers Act is unconstitutional. And because no one's actually called it into question, then the presidents are allowed to just go around the world, starting battles with different countries and saying, well, it's just a 30-day strike. Oh, it's just 60 days. It's not a big deal. It's not an actual war. Give me a break. This is a war. Like, we've been in war. I mean, you look at the authorization for use of force that was used in Afghanistan. We're still using that today. It's over 15 years later. We're still using the exact, people have this is almost a whole generation. We're still using the original declaration or the authorization for war. This is unbelievable. And I don't only blame the president for this. I think it's also Congress's job. Congress has said, well, we don't really want that actual power. Because they don't want to have to go back to their states and actually have to answer to their constituents. And it's their constituents whose kids are having their legs blown off and their arms blown off, or they're just not coming home altogether. That's why we need a declaration of war, is so that the people who are actually directly responsible to the constituents are held responsible. And because they're not, then we get to go to war willy-nilly. And it creates a just series of unintended consequences. And unintended consequences is something that I think overwhelmingly, conservatives who I think by and large our audience, conservatives or libertarians or whatever, people on the right, they understand unintended consequences. Like in the case of raising the minimum wage, and unintended consequences might be higher unemployment. They get that, but they don't understand that there are unintended consequences to going to war. This is like serious stuff.
So I've got a question. Is
wait a
this
minute? I'm trying to. There's like 15 different points that Tim just made. One of them, I have a real issue with, because, and I mean, I share the same outrage Tim does, is that we tend to do this in America, that we pass a law or we pass a principle that's constitutionally valid, and then that principle is used to justify some really hard shit. The original Constitution gave Congress one power traditionally over the states, and that's to regulate interstate commerce. Okay, and has since been used to justify literally any federal regulation that you want, because you can say, well, healthcare affects interstate commerce because if you're sick in Minnesota, it could affect you in Illinois. And it's an absolute horrible federalist argument to say that interstate commerce can just mean whatever the hell you want it to be, therefore the federal government can do whatever it wants. The War Powers Act, at the time it was passed, the idea was that the representatives of Congress might not be able to convene fast enough to respond to an attack, which at the time could be very constitutionally valid, in that the government needing to respond to an aggressive act of war might not have the time to meet immediately and declare war, so the president needs to be empowered to act. Since then, it has become, I agree with him, totally unconstitutional, is it's used to justify bullshit uses of force all over the world to enforce economic doctrine, which I don't agree with. I think that's actually really stupid. And that's why I said, remember at the time we were talking about Syria, I said I wasn't necessarily opposed to us getting involved in Syria. I was opposed to what we were doing in Syria because it serves no purpose. Shooting millions of dollars of missiles into empty buildings to try to prove a point that we have missiles and we're willing to shoot them at you is really not proving a point when it didn't accomplish anything except for making us look kind of retarded. You know, at the same time, if we were to use overwhelming military force to accomplish a goal, whatever that goal may be decided by our elected representatives, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it.
Got anything, Steph?
I do not, actually. It's been very receptive. Yeah.
Do you guys know, are right wingers largely in favor of Trump signing the Saudi arms deal? I know it's more recent.
Depends who you ask. It really depends who you ask.
A lot of split on that one on my Twitter.
Yeah.
Personally.
The neocons love it. The libertarian side of the coin really doesn't. And the Republican Party is kind of really split between those two right now, like the more libertarian conservatives and the more neocon conservatives. And I think it's pretty much an even split. I think in general, nobody cares all that much anyway. Like, I don't even think the Democrats mind so much.
I agree. And I think that's one of the sad things is that by and large, most people don't really care. I mean, most people don't even hear about these kinds of arms deals. Like, oh my gosh, did you know that we give billions of dollars we sold billions of dollars of missiles or arms or whatever to like Saudi Arabia? I mean, most people don't even know that. Like, how can you be mad at Saudi Arabia for anything when we're selling them all of this stuff? And the same thing even goes for ISIS. That's one of the biggest moral outrages. And I get into big like rants about this on the podcast, is that we're sending like young men over there and we're basically funding, arming and training the people that they're fighting against. And
not only do I completely agree with you, Tim, but I forgot that was a point that you brought up that I find incredibly. Not only do I agree with you, I find it outrageous. When Congress declares war, part of the process is that they have to institute a draft to meet operational needs. So it means that, with the exception of the George W. Bushes and, funny enough, the Donald Trumps of the world, most people's kids run the risk of going to war. And it becomes real for American citizens, which I think is something that we've gotten away from. That's a really bad thing. If we're going to declare war, it should be on all of us. It should be something we all feel. It should be something we all either agree with or disagree with. And because we've gotten away from that declaration of war and just let the president do whatever he wants, it's theoretical. It's like a movie. You know, we see missiles flying on TV and we're just like, oh, that sucks or that's awesome or whatever. But it's a theoretical argument because it's not our kids over there. It's the kids that volunteered to do it in the first place that are over there. You know, and I have a real problem with Congress not having a say in that. And that if our elected officials decide that that's the direction to go, then it's not us that are going to be participating in it in general. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think that really it's sad to say, but let's pose a hypothetical. If I had given a terrorist arms, like me personally, if I gave a terrorist weapons, and then I gave him money to go out and recruit his friends. And then I trained them all. How to use these firearms and RPGs and landmines and all sorts of stuff. Our government would convict me of treason, right? So isn't our own government is actually guilty of treason? They are funding the people that are fighting us. And it's so outrageous. It's almost like, oh, this is like a conspiracy theory or something. No, it's not even a conspiracy theory. It's just a conspiracy. Like, you can look it up on Wikipedia. Our government is funding ISIS. It's really, really bad. But we're sending You know, and I have a number of friends like who, you know, thank God none of them, you know, were hurt or killed over in the Middle East. But I have friends who went over there and fought, and I don't think they went into it knowing that the arms that they were, you know, they're dodging bullets. Those bullets were made in America. What the hell is going on? We need a serious reevaluation of American foreign policy, especially because, you know, from my point of view is that human life is sacred. Human life is something that we need to value, whether it's Americans or other people. But to your point, let's value American lives, you know, because they're Americans. Let's value them more than the other guys. So wait a minute. I'm sending my best buddy. Like, these are guys that I went to high school with, you know, we're sending them over there. Meanwhile, the CIA is funding the guys who are going to be fighting against them. That is messed up. That is really messed up. It's something that I get really pissed about, because these are people I care about. And, I made the point a long time ago where I said that I'm so patriotic that I think it's important that we question the reasons why we go to war in the first place.
Okay, Halsey, you want to reply to maybe that I kind of wanted to touch on the American lives matter more than other people's lives, because I feel like that probably isn't exactly what you're saying, but just if you could clarify or maybe dispute that a little bit.
One of my favorite quotes, I was just looking up for it, and it says exactly what Tim just said, and I couldn't agree more, is it says in a case concerning wiretapping by government agents, Justice Brandeis said, decency, security, and liberty alike demand that government officials shall be subjected to the same rules of conduct that are commands to the citizen. In a government of laws, existence of the government will be imperiled if it fails to observe the law scrupulously. Our government is the potent, the omnipresent teacher. For good or for ill, it teaches the whole people by its example. Crime is contagious. If the government becomes a lawbreaker, it breeds contempt for the law. It invites every man to become a law unto itself. It invites anarchy. And I couldn't agree more. I think that if we're, as a citizenry, not allowed to invoke our constitutional rights to send money to ISIS or guns to ISIS, then it shouldn't be okay if the government is engaging in behaviors that allow ISIS to get those same weapons. So I couldn't agree with him more.
All right, awesome. Well, we went through all the topics that I had for tonight. If you guys think of anything to fight about in the future,
which we will.
We'll gladly.
It never ends.
Gladly have more of that. I hope you all in the chat enjoyed the conversation tonight, and I do want to allow each of you kind of to plug your stuff again, because we did it at the beginning, and I want to be sure that you guys do it at the end here. But I feel like that's a pretty good place to end it for tonight. I mean, we've gone. I
know Tim had something afterwards. All I want to say is just, if you want to see more of my stuff, more Steph, more of our writers, come to halseynews.com. Josh has a column there. Tim has a column there. We got some great discussions. My YouTube channel is in the comments here. Come check me out. I broadcast almost nightly. Looking forward to furthering the conversation with all of you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Halsey. Steph?
Kind of the same thing. I also co-own Halsey News. I am also starting a YouTube show called Right Millennials. So if you want to check that out, the link is also in the description box. You can follow me on Twitter, and I plug my stuff there. Yeah.
And Tim?
Well, I love being in this position. And I can just ask you three, although I'm sure there'll be people that are in the chat and are commenting and all that kind of stuff. You remember when James O'Keefe dressed up like a pimp and went into Acorn offices and completely exposed them for the criminal schemes that they were? I think that was a really wonderful experience. I loved it that he totally exposed them for the frauds that they are. Well, I think that it's not just the guys at Acorn that are frauds. I think that there are hundreds of frauds in the federal government. And I know that I have one of them who is currently the representative for my own district. His name is Jim Sensenbrenner. And, well, here's my pitch. Either I back someone and I run someone's campaign who goes against Jim Sensenbrenner, or by this time next year, I'll run against Jim Sensenbrenner and we'll take him out because he's been in office since 1979. 38 years this guy has been in Washington. After he graduated law school, he immediately became a Wisconsin state representative. Then he became a state senator, and then he became a U.S. representative. He's done nothing since. He is he is the definition of a career politician. And like all I do right now is podcast and I write and I do YouTube videos on occasion, like the one
argue with me.
And argue with you. But by this time next year, if I'm still bored, then Jim Sensenbrenner, I'm coming for you.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very hopefully, we will be seeing a lot of you this summer at a conference that we're going to be announcing in the next few weeks. I encourage all of you to please call in to Tim, let him know what you think, give him encouragement, give him discouragement, but let him know exactly where you stand on this one, because I think this is incredibly important. And I think that if anyone is going to make a challenge against a sitting congressman, I think Tim is as good as any. And I would love to see you either support or give him your reasons for not supporting. But I think it's important that he hears from all of you on this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Big things happening. And then Tim, where can people find your stuff? I've got your links in the are you still doing the Patreon thing?
Yeah, patreon.com/Preuss, Preuss, on Twitter, at Tim_Preuss, Preuss, Facebook at Preuss Podcast, Instagram at Preuss Podcast, liberty.me. If you type in Preuss, you'll pull me up. If you type in Tim Preuss, again, for like the fifth time, Preuss, just Google me and all of my stuff will come up and you can find me there. And I'm pretty active on the interwebs.
You can't avoid him, really.
And guys, I'll put in one more personal plug for Tim. Honestly, other than paying my employees, like when my Patreon comes out to Tim every month, I consider it some of the best money I've ever spent. Listening to his podcast is honestly one of the highlights of my day whenever he comes out with a new one. So if you guys can see to it to come over there and throw him some love and all that, know that I do it personally. I don't just recommend it because I liked him, but it's worth every penny. He's doing a real amazing job out there. And I think that everybody should show him some support if they can.
Right on. Well, thanks everyone for coming on. I really enjoyed having you on. Really enjoyed the banter. Really enjoyed being able to use the mute function on my moderator panel for once.
I thought you did it. I wasn't thinking you'd do it.
No.
Like, Josh, get them in line.
I don't come to mess around. No. I really had a good time with you guys, and then there's a lot of really, really great people in this group that we're doing. So thanks so much. And thanks so much to the chat for coming out. If you like this show, feel free to subscribe on YouTube. Also, we're on the Resistance Podcast is on Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher Podcasts. My co-host Bryce is going to be coming back early June and start recording episodes. My sister Brittany will be on the podcast this week, so that'll be fun. A lot of good stuff going on. You can find us at resistancepodcast.com, on Twitter at rise_and_resist. And I think that's just about Facebook. Mine's
you can also find his column at halseynews.com once a week.
And Halsey News. I'm still getting used to that.
Yeah, Josh writes an awesome weekly column for us. I highly recommend it. Some of my best ideas come from arguing with Josh, so it's a lot of fun. Please check him out there. But continue.
It's definitely true, but I'm not willing to kind of admit that.
Maybe one of these days we'll fight, Steph. But yeah, anyway, so that's all we got for you tonight. Stay tuned for updates. I post a lot on the social media, so you'll know when the next shows are coming. But thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will catch you.